Welcome back to the 21 Convention 2019 of Orlando, Florida. Our next speaker is a returning speaker to the 21 Convention, presenting for his first time at the Patriarch Edition earlier this year in one of the workshops we had. He is also a licensed marriage and family therapist based out of Colorado. He's been married for over 35 years. You can find out more about him at solidman.com. Without further ado, please let me welcome to the 21 Convention stage, Ken Curry. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Anthony.
Yes, sir.
I'm here for one reason. I'm going to talk about one thing: your identity. Probably the most important question a man can ask in his life is, who am I? But you'll never be able to answer that question unless you answer this question: who is telling my story? You see, everybody in your life, your entire life, has been telling you who you are, has been telling a certain narrative about who you are, about what life is all about, and you've believed them. And you're here for one purpose as well. You've invested your time, your money, to be able to have the hope that you could walk away from this weekend with a little more strength and a little more confidence. But you will never find your confidence if somebody else is telling your story. For me, I've lived pretty much my whole life with pretty much no confidence. I've been listening to what everybody else has said. I live what I call an externally referenced life, where I'm more concerned about what other people thought of me, living for approval, trying to make other people happy, living up to their expectations. I didn't have a really good, solid sense of my own identity, and I lived the externally referenced life. One of the stories that my wife and I laugh about is, and this is going to date me for sure, is that back, I was a young man in my 30s, and I would be absolutely fearful of going into a video store and picking out a video. I would be more concerned with what the girl behind the counter would think of me and think about what the video that I picked than finding a video that I liked and thought would be entertaining. So I'd be in a video store and I'd be stuck and I couldn't even move. Or my wife would send me to the grocery store, and she'd send me for tortillas or spaghetti sauce or something like that. And I'd go to the grocery store and I'd be frozen, absolutely frozen. Do I get corn or do I get flour? Do I get a dozen or 2 dozen? Do I get the sauce with the sausage or the mushroom? I couldn't figure out what to get because I had to get it right. I had to figure it out. I couldn't get it wrong, and I couldn't disappoint. I was so much more concerned about what she thought of me than about actually getting it right or doing something that I wanted. I had an externally referenced life. So, the question is who is telling our story? Who's told our story our entire lives? Let's start with our family of origin. Your family of origin is where you start. Now here's what I want you to see. It's a system that's been there way before you even existed. And all of a sudden, you pop out of your mother's womb into this system. And there you are. And now, since you're part of this group, they start telling your story. They tell you about what life is all about. They tell you what men are all about. They tell you who you are. They assign you a certain role or tell you certain rules that you have to follow, and you start to believe them. This is the place that gets really tough, because a lot of guys, they'll be in a family and they have to figure out, how do I do this and get it right? Because there's a lot of families out there that'll tell you you have to be perfect, or you can't be a burden, or you can't have wants or needs, or whatever. I mean, we all know this. We all have our little thing that we got going on. But the whole idea, let's take the whole idea of being perfect and getting it right. Guess what? You're human. And you're a kid. You haven't figured it out. You don't know what's going on. But yet, you have to be able to get it right. And you make mistakes. And so here you are, you're going, I'm not perfect. I've been told I have to be perfect, but I'm not. And so that's where the roots of I'm not good enough or something's wrong with me begins to take hold inside of you. And then the next thing is school. Third graders are brilliant with this. I don't think any one of us escaped third grade without some kind of scars. It's pretty significant. Third graders are brilliant. A couple of my friends. One of my friends, a kid in the third grade, was messing with him, and he goes, "Hey, Nostradamus." I mean, pretty brilliant kid. I figured out who Nostradamus was, made a joke out of it. But my friend, every time that he looks at a mirror, he thinks, gosh, how's my nose? And we're talking as an adult man, and some kid in the third grade said this. Wonder what's wrong with my nose. Or my other friend, brilliant. He's like Mensa level brilliant. Third grade kid. The teacher goes, all right, here's the test, everybody. When you finish your test, go ahead and then turn it in when you're done. And so my friend, smart kid, he rocks it, man. He just kills it, takes it up. A couple minutes later, boom, on the teacher's desk. He's getting ready to turn around. And this kid at the front row says, "You're not that smart." He goes ahead and sits down. Guess what he's done his entire life? Through high school, through college, and even as an adult man, it's like he would take a test and he would sit in the back and wait for everybody else to put their tests up, and then he would turn his in. Because he's going, am I that smart? And he was even though he's brilliant, he's questioning his intelligence. Teachers, you're never going to figure this out, or you're never going to make it, or let's see, what's a famous one? I can't even think of it, but the whole idea of you're not gonna make it in life, something like that. We get these messages, and coaches will say something like "you're a pussy" or something like that, and it sticks to us. These are the people that are telling our story. Church. Church is a pretty tough one. A lot of us have pretty tough stories about church. The whole idea of the narrative would be you're a sinner or something's wrong with you. For me, it was pretty tough because what I wanted to be able to do was to believe in myself and trust myself. But there was this message that my heart was not good and I could not trust it. If I trusted my desires or whatever, I would just spin out of control and start being a crazy sinner and do all kinds of crazy stuff. That was the narrative, that I couldn't trust myself. There's other things going on now, like for instance, you have to have a woman in your life to be able to sanctify you or to move you toward godliness, which Pat said a little bit about that there is something about being moved toward maturity, but not godliness. You don't need a woman in your life for that. I think it's there's no mediator between God and man, and it's definitely not a woman. Well, there is one mediator, Jesus, between God and man. It's definitely not your woman. I'm a follower of Jesus. I like Jesus. I don't think his voice is ever a voice of condemnation. I think he calls you out quite a bit, but it's not a voice of condemnation. But a lot of the stuff that's coming out of the church and the narrative that they say about us as men, it just about makes me cringe. Culture. Think about all the messages, the narrative that comes from culture. Man, if you hear the word masculinity nowadays, it's always preceded by toxic. That's the story. You're an oppressor, you're an abuser, you're a rapist, you're a racist, you're all this stuff is what's going on with the story that the culture is saying about men. You're just a utility to keep the machine going, so put your head down and don't complain. It's the Ray Romanos and the buffoons and all this, that men are just buffoons, fools. That's the narrative. Women. We go to women to try to get our validation. She's going to complete me. She's going to tell me who I am. She's going to give me my value. That's what we do. We find out what their narrative of me, and we try to get that. I want them to make me feel better about myself by telling me who I am. The manosphere. The manosphere is almost as good as third graders. Not quite. And they'll say things like, you spurgy neckbeard, or you're a mouth-breathing incel, lives in your mother's basement. Man, I don't know where the mouth breather thing came from, but I used to be a mouth breather. Man, my nose got busted up with sports as a young man. I could never really breathe well. And so when they would call somebody a mouth breather, I'd go, what's wrong with that? And then finally, I got my nose fixed a couple years ago. They cleaned it out and the deviated septum and all that. I'm no longer a mouth breather, but I carry something really kind of deep in my heart for mouth breathers. So, but that's the way they talk, right? A lot of people on the manosphere, they're telling a story. For instance, like they might say, "What are you? A blue pill soy beta cuck?" Or with Pat, "You purple pill soy beta cuck." You know, it's just name calling, and it's a narrative. It's telling something about who you are, and we listen to this stuff. Probably the most difficult thing in our life, where somebody's telling our story, are the abusers in our lives. You know, all of us have had somebody. We've got our emotional abusers, we have physical abuse, and we have sexual abuse. I've kind of already talked about how emotional abuse with the name calling and telling you that you're not good enough and things like that. Physical abuse, if you were to get beat, smacked around. Probably one of the most difficult things is you start to believe I deserve it. That's what I deserve. I'm a piece of junk, so I deserve this. And that's the narrative that starts to be brought on you. But probably most difficult is the sexual abuse, because it's got this ambivalence. On one hand, it feels amazing. You've been groomed. This person they make you feel wanted. They make you feel special. And even the sexual abuse itself sometimes actually feels pretty amazing. And your world is opened up to something that shouldn't be opened up yet. But it's fantastic, and it's mysterious, and it's amazing. And so on one hand, there's something amazing about the abuse process, which sucks us in. But then on the other hand, bam! You're a piece of garbage. You're not good enough. I don't like you anymore. You better not tell anybody about this. And so you don't have a voice. Man, that's tough. But that's what I'm talking about. People tell our story. When projection is part of what this is, when somebody takes their own beliefs about themselves and projects that self-image onto another person, that's what I'm talking about. Let's say the abuser. The abuser feels really horrible about themselves because it probably happened to them. And they take this horrible internal sense of self and they throw it onto you. So here you are as a kid believing something about yourself that this person believed about themselves, that their abuser believed about themselves. And it's all projected into you. And this is what it is, somebody else telling you your story that's totally not true. And that's the projection piece. And it could be either negative or positive. I'm talking about the negative, throwing something really horrible, a very horrible self-image into you. But it can also be positive. And I think that's a lot of why you guys are here. Being able to be an individual who actually brings really positive things to the world. And we want to be fathers and husbands and men who actually speak blessing and honor to the people around us. To be able to say things like, "You've got this," or "I love you, I'm proud of you." Because out of a mouth, as a man speaks, it comes out of what's in his heart. And if it's negative stuff's coming out. Don't hang out with those people. If it's positive things, those are the guys that you want to hang out with. Those are the people you want to be with. If you find the truth about who you are and follow the true narrative, you will find your soul, you will find your heart, you'll find your confidence. So what is confidence? I have the 2 cornerstones of confidence. First cornerstone is just a category of I'm okay. Just being able to say I'm okay. It's just a foundation. Just being able to say I'm good enough, I'm okay. It's about my solid identity and defeating shame. Shame is this thing that destroys us. I think John Bradshaw, in his book back in the 70s or 80s, said it best. He compared guilt and shame. Guilt says, I made a mistake. Shame says, I am a mistake. Guilt is, I made a mistake, it's about my behavior. That's great, that's good. Be guilty for what you did. If you make a mistake, it's cool. Shame is a big problem. Shame says, I am a mistake. Something's wrong with me. I'm not okay. I don't measure up. I'm not good enough. I don't deserve shit. Or I am a piece of shit. That's shame. And you'll never be able to even say I'm okay if shame is still creeping and crawling inside of your body. You got to be able to defeat shame, create a solid identity, and at least be able to say I'm okay. The second cornerstone is I've got this. This is about my capability. So there's 2 things, my identity, my capability. Being able to say I got this is a really powerful part of confidence. You can't go through life with confidence if you don't think you can handle whatever situation comes up. This is where initiation comes through. Initiation is a process of going through difficult times, discomfort, really hard stuff, or pain, and coming out the other side and going, I survived. I'm not so damn fragile, or I'm not going to die. And that's a really powerful thing to be able to know that I can handle it. I got this. Tanner was talking about boxing, right? And his monthly adventure, was that what it was? No, it's with his buddy doing new things, right? To kind of push the envelope. And what he's doing is he's creating his own initiation. And that's what we need to be able to do. Actually engage in difficulty, move forward in discomfort, do things that are risky and difficult that I don't know that I'm okay with. You know, there's tons of things you can do to push yourself into initiation. A really strong part of initiation, classically, I know a couple of people have talked about it already, is the whole idea of a boy being pulled out of the world of women and into the liminal space that is certain death or potential death. And then as the boy pulled away from that, it would scare the hell out of anybody coming out of that comfort into this space where it's total uncertainty. Who knows what's going to happen in this spot? But as he grows and is initiated, he comes out of it going, I got this. I can handle it. So those are the 2 things. This is what's going to bring you confidence, being able to create a solid identity by defeating shame, or creating a solid capability through allowing yourself to be initiated. A couple of the guys have talked about how it's fun to look at words. This is a word that totally describes what I'm talking about. The word authority. The word authority means somebody has power over you. If you look at it, you break it up, it's author. The author, that's the person who's telling a story, has power over you. So if you think about all those people, a woman who rejects you, oh, I'm crushed. A third grader who tells you something stupid, totally haunts you to this day. Or your abuser saying something really horrible. Those are all the authors. I either let them have power over me, because that's the thing. My own confidence is my birthright. I have it. But what we do is we hand it over and give it to other people. We allow them to be the author of our life, and now they're the authority. They have power over us. Let's look at the story of Iron John. This is actually a Grimm fairy tale, so it's really old. And it was made popular by Robert Bly in his book, Iron John. It's a great read. It's a kind of, they call it a mytho-poetic type of thing. So it's a fun read. It's got a lot of really good information. Robert Bly does a great job with it. I'm just going to give a snippet of it and kind of something to help us unpack this, the whole story thing a little bit. So Iron John is the story of a prince in an ancient kingdom with the king and the queen and a castle and a big, huge kingdom. And adjacent to the castle is this really vast forest. And in the forest is this guy named Iron John. He's the wild man. He is strong, mysterious, and hairy. And the problem is that anybody who goes into the forest never comes back. So one day, Iron John, the wild man, is captured, and they put him in a cage in the courtyard of the castle. And what happens is that the prince is playing with his golden ball. And he's bouncing it around, and somehow the golden ball bounces into the cage of Iron John. And the prince goes up to the cage. "May I have my ball back?" Iron John says, "Only if you release me from the cage." And the boy says, "I don't have the key. Where's the key?" "The key," says Iron John, "is under your mother's pillow." The prince is us. He's a boy, but most of us, as we've listened to the stories that have come into us from external places, most of us, we're still boys. In our 20s, 30s, 40s, maybe even 50s, we still feel like a boy inside because we're still asking for our balls back and wondering where the damn key is. The queen, who has the pillow, she's not even in this snippet except that she's the one that has the pillow. She's all women. The queen represents all women in this whole thing. And she has a lot of power in this story. The wild man, wait, hang on a second. So the queen, a big part of her narrative is that the wild man is not good. As a matter of fact, the wild man scares the hell out of her. And her narrative is, if you set the wild man free, all hell is going to break loose. She's going to lose her son. He's going to become some kind of tyrant. He's going to hump everything in sight. He's going to end up in a gutter in some nondescript part of town. It scares the hell out of her to think that the wild man would come alive in her son. She would much rather the son just be a boy for the rest of his life. The wild man is our confidence. The wild man is who we are when we are alive. Now, there's another thing I was going to say about that. not coming to me, so that's all right. The mother's pillow. All right, so the mother's pillow is just a distraction. Now here's the thing, it's a pillow. Underneath the pillow is the key. It's just a distraction. It's just something that hides the key. And the key is underneath the mother's pillow. The pillow represents, it's a metaphor for women's sexuality. And so it's something that totally distracts us. So imagine that the prince, and he goes back into the castle. He's down the hallway right outside his mother's bedroom. And he goes in, it's all quiet. Goes in, he looks in there. All right, there's the bed. Crawls or walks on in, there's the pillow. And he sees the pillow. Now what he's looking at is the sexuality of women. And he sees the form. He sees the shape. He sees the beauty. He sees the allure. Oh, this is what I've been looking for all my life. She can complete me. She can fulfill me. She can make me whole. She can tell me who I am. And all of a sudden, he totally and absolutely forgets about his mission to get the key to set the wild man free. And this is what we do. This is actually what I think that what's it called? The midlife crisis. A midlife crisis is all of a sudden a guy has been distracted with the pillow and women's sexuality, which is a super shiny object. It's distracted me, and I lost my mission. My mission was to grab the key and set the wild man free. But I've spent 20 years of my life over here with the pillow, which has distracted me from my mission to get the key. The pillow, right? That's what we do. And we wake up 20 years later going, where the hell am I? So imagine the prince 20 years later standing in his mother's bedroom. Gosh, what am I here for? I was here for a reason. Oh yeah, my mission. I was going to grab the key and set the wild man free. So then he goes on over to the pillow. No, I can't do that again. So he grabs the key and takes off and goes down to the courtyard. And he sees the cage. The cage are the lies that keep us in bondage. The cage that holds the wild man, the lies of all those stories that are not true about who you are and about what men are and about what manhood is. That's what keeps us in bondage. And if we believe it, that's what happens. We're in bondage. We are not free. So, here's the whole thing. So if the wild man really is set free, is all hell going to break loose? Of course. But the prince, you will be free. You will be alive. You will live with vigor and vitality. And one of my favorite words, thumos. You will be alive. So the narrative is, if the wild man's set free, everything's going to be horrible. But the truth is, everything's going to be awesome. The lies. The key is the truth. It's the true story of who you really are. So here's the prince. He has the key. He's going over to the wild man's cage. And right before he puts the key in, that's when good old Worm Tongue shows up. This isn't in the story. This is part of my story. Worm Tongue is this voice, that inner critic. He's just about ready to put the key in, and Worm Tongue says, why would you want to do that? You know that's going to be pure disaster as soon as you turn the key. Your mother is going to be so disappointed. You're going to ruin everything. You're going to be left and abandoned and rejected. This is the voice. Good old Worm Tongue, man. He says all kinds of stuff. He's a bastard. The prince, this time, doesn't listen. Goes in, unlocks the cage. The key is the truth. about who you are. It unlocks the cage. It tells you this is who I really am. Rather than believing that I'm a piece of shit or that I'm no good or that something's wrong with me, I start to find out what my true narrative is, who I really am. Here's the secret. The key, the truth that will set you free is already inside you. The story kind of tells, the story of Iron John says, oh, the key is over there. And this is what most men believe, that the key is actually I have to go through the world of women or the sexuality of women to find the truth about who I am. And that's a lie. But this is the story goes because this is what most men actually believe. But what I'm telling you here this morning is that the key is already inside of you. The truth about who you are is already inside of you. And if you're ever going to find your confidence, you have to be able to find out who is telling your story, challenge the hell out of it, and find out the truth about who you really are. All right, remember, you're never going to find your confidence if someone else is telling your story. You want to live a life of confidence? Find out who you are and tell your own story. Thank you. So yeah, we've got time for feedback, questions. You want to line up back there, and whoever wants to ask some questions, feel free.
Ken, thank you so much for that story and for that narrative. So question, maybe I'm thinking too deeply about this, but Iron John being the confidence, I guess for the purpose of the story, he was already free. So how did he become captured, and is that a parallel to us men?
So in this story, it's just, I think the hunter somehow captures him. And I think it's kind of an irrelevant part of the story of how he got captured. I just think the fact that he is in a cage, that's the power of the story. Somehow he's in it. And I think the narrative, the metaphor for us is we're in a cage as well. And we are also imprisoned. We are also, in bondage, I guess is the word. I'm not sure if that's answering the question.
It does. It does.
But is it? Yeah, so, all right.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Hi. Thanks for your speech. It was very good. My question is, what was what caused you to transition from being externally validated to internally, and how?
This is a great question.
Was it a 10-year process, a 5-year process?
All right. So it's been my lifetime, and it's been just the transition from being an externally referenced nice guy. So I'll give a lot of kudos to Robert Glover, No More Mr. Nice Guy. I'm actually part of his network, and Robert has done some really, really hugely influential things in my life. I'm really bummed he didn't make it this week. Yeah, so that's part of my process. So the other part of what I've done is I've been on a journey that I've been really committed to. I have been committed to, I want internal health. I know there's a possibility that I could gain confidence, that I can gain a strong identity, that I can find out who the hell I am, and become the man that I really want to be. And you said a 10-year process, so it's been, easily, I'm 58, so gosh, we're pushing on 6 decades of learning about this stuff. And so you just have to be you have to be committed to being able to say, I'm going to grow, I'm going to become the man that I know that I can be, and really challenge the narratives about the stuff that I've been told my whole life. And so I've done a lot of reading. Gosh, the guys here have taught, what do they say? You got to do a lot of lifting. I've done a hell of a lot of sports and activity in my life, and I think that's been a really big deal for me as well, just to gain some confidence. Doing the things like pushing the limits and initiating yourself, always moving into discomfort. This thing here, speaking up here on stage, man, what is it like? 98% of people would rather die than speak publicly. You know, it's like, this is a very discomforting thing to get up here. And so this is really pushing me into a different place. And so doing things that are uncomfortable and initiating, and that's how you make this happen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ken, that was a great discussion.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to circle back around a little bit on the shame and confidence situation you were speaking about.
Mm-hmm.
And why don't you give us some tips on how to deal with some of those shame? I've done some shameful things, I know that, over the years that I've been dealing with. But the simple fact is maybe give us a few tips on how to deal with that shame to find that confidence.
Okay. Yeah, so first is just being able to go, okay, I know what shame is, and I know what the messages that have come to me. And when you start hearing yourself say you're not good enough, or you don't measure up, or you're a piece of shit, or you know, something's wrong with you, or any of that language that you start hearing yourself, now you can start going, that's shame. That is shame talking. And that's a really powerful part of this. One of the most important parts of this whole journey for you guys is observation. Just paying attention to what's going on inside of me and saying and listening to what's happening and hearing the messages that I'm speaking to myself. And so one of the first and probably most important parts of this is just being able to notice when shameful thoughts or shameful ideas come into me or I hear them, and really challenge them immensely and go, is that true? Am I a piece of shit? Am I no good? You know, is it always my fault? Whatever it is, just the first is really challenging the narrative that is being spoken or being said. And there's a lot of reading you could do. I was talking about John Bradshaw. His book is Healing the Shame That Binds You. Old classic. I mean, gosh, it's probably pushing 40 years old or something. Another person who's kind of picked up where he left off is Brene Brown. You might have heard some of her stuff about shame. It's just learn about it, find out about it, and the big thing that I'm talking about is just challenge it and get your own story back. Find out who you really are. That's how we really defeat shame.
Thanks, Ken, for the speech. Hits home in a lot of ways. The question I have for you is, at the end of your talk, you said we should tell our own story. Can you talk about ways that we do that? Do you mean that more kind of symbolically, or do you mean that very literally?
It's probably both, symbolically and literally. It was interesting, a couple of my guys are here. And just before this morning, we were talking about what in my group, in the group process we talk about finding your true name, which is another way to say finding your true identity. And the whole idea of telling your own story is coming to a place to where you're able to say, this is who I am. And I'm able to say I'm a good man. I'm able to say I have a good mind. I'm able to say I have a really good heart. And that's me telling my story. And I believe really good things about you. I believe you are good men. I believe that when men are set free, that really, really good things happen. It's when we're in bondage to all this stuff that when shaky things and horrible things happen. And so what do I really believe? And so finding your true narrative is finding your true name. One of the fun clip that I use as a metaphor in group about this is the Maximus statement, or in Gladiator, where Commodus comes down to the field and sees Gladiator and he's got his mask on and he goes, Gladiator, what is your name? What's his true identity? Is what he's asking. And he pulls it up like this about the time Commodus is shitting himself when he sees who it really is. My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, commander of the Northern Legion, general to the true emperor Marcus Aurelius, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my revenge in this life or the next. That's his name. That's his narrative. And each one of us can hold that same kind of voice when we say who we really are. And it's fun. It's really fun to hear the men speak their Maximus statement when they say who they really are. And we can all do that as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
You and I talked a little bit about projection last night, and I got to thinking, projection comes from a dark, like a secret place in somebody else, right?
Yeah.
It's probably tied to their own shame. And I think it definitely tells more about them than it does about yourself, but somehow we internalize it. What are your thoughts, like, how do people detect that negative projection that's coming from others? So you can kind of realize that it's not you, it's actually
A projection.
a projection. I mean, how do you tell
Okay.
detect that?
No, that's great. That's great. Gosh, there's so much that's talked about, and I know Sean talked about this last spring and last fall, Sean Smith, and his tactical book about women and stuff. One of the biggest things is your intuitive. You really have to listen to your intuitive as you move through this stuff. And this is a really powerful part of being an internally referenced man, having an internal validation, knowing that I'm good enough, having my identity really strong internally, and then using the internal resources that I have and trusting that, trusting your heart, trusting your gut, trusting your ability to discern. And I think that's probably the biggest thing is we, as we go, we have these abusive things or we have these stories and we lose our ability to trust our own selves. And that's that external reference. One of the things like, for instance, guys that are really fresh in this process, when they're very externally referenced and they're only really worried about what everybody else wants, they don't even know what they want. And asking the question, what do I want, is like a mystery. I've never asked that question before. And so starting to ask the question, what do I want, is starting to listen to my internal resources. What do I desire? What's going on inside of me? And so the discernment about what's going on or what somebody else is feeding me really comes to you from your intuitive and from your gut and from your spirit, and being able to see and discern that, hey, that's a negative bunch of bullshit that's coming my way that you're throwing into my basket. And now I need to block my basket and hold a couple boundaries and say, no, you can't do that to me. Yeah? All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. I appreciate being here.